What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest out brew the Magic world. As always, that deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as well as I'd really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, look at those links in the description. I'd really appreciate it. But today, we're continuing through Bloomborough, having a ton of fun, and we're going to start getting into the main set commanders. And I thought it'd be fun to start with our tribal commanders that we're getting in this set. And as a shout out to Mikey, I thought I'd start with blue-white birds, Azorius birds, headed up by Kastral the Windcrested, a 5-mana Azorius bird scout, 4/5 with flying. It says whenever one or more birds you control deal combat damage to a player, we get to choose one. Put a bird from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Put a counter on each bird you control, or draw a card. I really like Kastral. I think Kastral's a really interesting commander. Birds tend to be very small and evasive. What I like about Kastral is it gives you some staying power for hitting people in the air for 1 or 2 with a bird, and making it really scary. Look at this. I mean, you have ability to just kind of collie down a bird from your hand, which feels really good. Getting a counter across the board or drawing a card. I mean, I love the abilities. So as far as the deck goes, we're going to talk about our bird friends, the team of birds that we're going to be bringing to the table, how we're going to make the birds hit harder, and then trying to get some effects off actually hitting our opponents instead of just casual. Try to accumulate more drawing cards and what have you, so we can get into getting more birds down, bigger combats, and trying to win the game in the air. But as far as our birds go, there's a lot of great old birds and some new birds alike. Empyrean Eagle gives all their creatures with flying +1/+1, and it's a bird itself. SEO Award-winning Familiar will actually just protect Kastral with it, giving it Ward 3 when it comes to spells that target it, which is pretty cool. Ishai, Ochtide Dragon Speaker, is a threat in its own right. Whenever our opponent casts a spell, you put a counter on it. That's pretty cool. Just allows us to potentially have a threat that's going to keep growing. And since all these are already in the air anyway, it means that our opponent has to be in the air in order for them to deal with us. Otherwise, we're just going to keep hitting them. Jackdaw Savior, whenever it or another creature with flying we control dies, we can return another creature lesser mana value from our graveyard to the battlefield. I really like this ability for a couple reasons. One, if people go after the birds that really matter, we can get some cheap birds back from the graveyard. But two, with the way that the commander rule works now, for your commander dying, it's still going to hit the graveyard, meaning we can still get a bird back even if somebody removes Kastral by destroying it. Kanji Skywarden, probably another great bird commander in its own right. I just think Kastral pushes it out with its ability. Whenever it attacks Kastral, attacking creatures with flying get +2/+0 until end of turn. And whenever Kanji blocks, blocking creatures with flying get +0/+2 until end of turn. And it has vigilance, so Kanji's a great bird for both offense and defense. Not all of our birds have vigilance, but we do have some ways to give them vigilance. And then the next bird starts a run of just birds that bring us great value. Keeper of the Nine Gales is a flying 1/2 for 3 mana, which is not a terribly great stat line for the cost. But then you can tap it and tap 2 untap birds you control, just return target permanent to its owner's hand, meaning at instant speed we can tap 3 birds to just put something back in our opponent's hand. That can be a very important ability, especially at the right time. Disrupt a combo, stop a combat. There's a lot of things that ability can do, and it's important to have things like that around, especially when some of our things make tokens. Mockingbird from the new set feels great. It comes in as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird and it has flying. That's a crazy ability, depending on what we're playing against. The cool part is, it could be our own bird if we wanted to. We can copy one of our other birds if need be, but if not, we can copy a key opponent's things, maybe a key effect or a key threat, get our own copy of it, and it's a bird and it's in the air. Shabraz just seems like a ton of fun. Flying, whenever you draw a card, put a counter on it and gain a life. And you can give a human flying till end of turn. That's not really as important. What's important is if Kastral chooses to draw a card for its ability, or we use any of these other abilities we're going to talk about to draw cards, Shabraz just gets bigger and bigger. Skycat Sovereign's pretty cool. It gets +1/+1 for each other creature we control flying, and then for 4 mana we can make a bird token. That's not a bad little mana sink towards the end of the game if we really just need to throw mana into something. Warden the Evos Owl going to reduce creatures with flying by 1 to cast. Watcher of the Spheres is going to do the same thing. But Watcher of the Spheres says whenever another creature with flying enters, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And then playing a card from Cons that I truly love and makes, I mean, why not play it in a Birds deck? Mikey and I share love for the Tarkir block so much. And that's Wingmate Rocks. When it comes in, if you attacked this turn, you make a 3/4 bird token as well. Meaning for 5 mana, you're getting 2 3/4s. And then when it attacks, you just gain a life for each attacking creature you have, which could be just enough to help you stabilize on some boards as you're attacking and trying to get into your opponents. Well, as far as buffing the team goes, we have things like Rally Wings, which can be a kind of scary Alpha Strike card if in the right situations. Untap all creatures we control, and creatures with flying get +2/+2 that we control until end of turn. I like Rally for 2 reasons. One, it can be a big, I need to attack on my turn to knock somebody else out. But what I really like about Rally as well is it can be a big, oh, you think I'm tapped out? Nope, I'm going to tap all of my flyers. They get a buff, and now I can block profitably and potentially stop somebody from hitting me back. Patchwork Banner is a 3-mana mana rock, but also just buffs all birds because we're going to choose that as our type. Always Watching gives all of our non-token creatures +1/+1 in Vigilance. That means we can attack and block completely freely, right? Rather than be so afraid to when to attack and how to attack since we have to tap them. Favorable Winds, just a +1/+1 buff for our creatures with flying. Flowing with the White Tree is a buff I really love because not only does it just give all your non-legendary creatures +1/+1 like something like Favorable Winds would, but all your legendary creatures get +2/+1 and Ward 1, meaning this will help protect Kastral and some of the other legendary birds we have and hopefully keep them out in the battlefield. Murmuration, new card for the precon, seems really fun, giving all of our birds +1/+1 in Vigilance. Now for 5 mana, that is kind of a steep cost, but the difference is the second ability. At the beginning of our end step, for each spell we cast this turn, we get a 1/2 token named Stormcrow. And that's great because that means we're going to be just adding more birds to our board, and those are going to be great blockers if we have all these buffs out. Rally the Ranks, just to give a flat +1/+1 to all of our birds. And then Soulcatcher's Aerie is a fun buff, especially for birds. So whenever a bird is put into our graveyard from play, we put a feather counter on it, and all birds get +1/+1 for each feather counter in Soulcatcher's Aerie. This is an enchantment that if you leave it alone, I've seen this a couple times, make those birds unbearable to deal with. This can get brutal if no one removes it and leaves it alone. Even your 1/1 birds can start being 6/6s or 7/7s and be really hard to deal with. We have a couple of these whenever you deal damage to a player, draw card type abilities in the decks, and that can be really important because we want to make sure we're getting a ton of cards into our hand and using our mana effectively. But Strixhaven Stadium adds a fun alternate win con to the deck. We can tap it to add a colorless mana, and if we do, we put a point counter on it. Whenever a creature we control, whenever a creature does damage to us, we take a point counter off it. But the big ability is whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to an opponent, we put a point counter on it. And then if it has 10 or more point counters on it, remove all of them, and that player loses the game. This gives us a really way to potentially go wide in the air and still knock somebody out. And the cool part is we could stack all those stadium triggers exactly how we want to make sure we knock the right person out. I love Stadium. I still have yet to ever win with it in a game, but I can't wait to. And then Kid Discovery just makes a ton of sense. We pick birds. Whenever a bird comes in or when it attacks, we draw a card. Again, great card draw, get to the things we really want, and keep the game pushing. As far as getting in the testing go, I think there's a lot of ways we could make the deck better. The first is maybe more buffs, like something like Gravitational Shift, just to give our flyers a little bit more of a buff. That's something we could consider. There are more +1/+1 buffs than I talked about here or that are in the list. But I think it's something we'd find out pretty quickly if our birds just aren't hitting hard enough to make our flying evasion enough of an advantage. Distant Melody can get us some card draw. Choosing bird and just drawing a card for each bird we control. That's pretty great. Could potentially help there. Or a one-sided board wipe like Raise the Palisade just to call birds and return all non-birds back to their hands. That could be a great kind of Alpha Strike card. I like Raise the Palisade, and it probably should come in. I just honestly wasn't sure what to cut for it. I was trying to kind of, cover the spread on the deck and trying to make sure that we have interactions for a lot of things, counter spells, removal, protection, and I'm just not entirely sure where to bring Raise the Palisade in. Now, I do have a bounce spell in the deck in Wave Goodbye, which is return all creatures that don't have +1/+1 counters on them to their owner's hands. That's still a pseudo one-sided board bounce for us. right? Because Kastral can put plus 1/+1 counters on all of our birds, but the only difference there is if our opponents have counters on their creatures, then it's not as one-sided as we'd hope. So I guess that comes down to preference. The difference is Wave Goodbye costs real-life dollars half of what Raise the Palisade does, and that's kind of why I made that decision, because I still care about budget for these decks and trying to make sure that I'm offering something at every budget level. But I think if budget is less of a care and you're trying to make this deck better, I think Palisade does come in. But let's get into our playtest. Let's have some fun with some birds. First up, Soaring Talisman feels like a great turn 1, and although it might get you a little targeted at the table, it's going to lead to a turn 2 Kastral. So that's Plains, Soaring, and Talisman. This is a killer turn 1. This also does leave up Pong if we really wanted to, but what basically this just comes down to is a turn 2 Kastral, and just means that we're going to be able to really push hard into our opponents. Lupinpool Village, I mean, I don't see a world where we don't just slam Kastral here turn 2. Just get it done. No, Kastral can't attack this turn, but that's okay. This is going to set up a Kastral trigger for next turn. Turn 3, scary to say that we have 6 mana on turn 3, but that's what Soaring does for you. I like the idea of getting the stadium down. So I think I would do that. 1, 2, 3 maybe. And then 3 mana to put down maybe something like Kanji's Lieutenant, if we want to. I like the idea of Cloud Chaser Kestrel if anyone has an enchantment to destroy, but if not, I don't really want to play it. But I think that's what I'd probably do. I'd just pay 3 for the Lieutenant. Now the fun part here is we tap the Strixhaven Stadium, so it's going to get a counter, right? We attack with Kastral. Kastral's going to hit somebody on turn 3, especially with it being in the air. When we get a choice, do we want to put a bird down? Do we want to put a counter on other birds? Do we want to draw a card? In this scenario, I kind of want to draw a card. I want to get myself into some more birds so we could start getting into more stuff. But the cool interaction here about Kastral's first ability of putting finality counters on it is Nesting Grounds. It says we can move target counter from a target permanent you control to another target permanent and activate only as a sorcery. What that means is that we can move that finality counter from the creature that we put down to something else, like one of our lands or an artifact or something random, whatever we want to do. But it could potentially keep that creature around instead of the finality counter, right, which is when it dies, it gets exiled. So I think that's important. But we drew the card with Kastral. I'm A-okay with that. We go into turn 4, still with 7 mana this time. Ledger Shredder is a great draw. Could start helping us out a ton. I think we gotta be careful because we only have 1 blue source, right? That's probably something to keep in the back of our head. But I would use the Talisman in that to play Skycat Sovereigns. That way we get that started for a future turn. And at this point, I'd probably just leave up Unbreakable Formation, move to combat, swing Kanji at somebody, Kanji's Lieutenant at somebody, swing Kestrel at somebody. And so that goes up to 2. It would go up to 4. Again, provided nobody hit us on turn 3. We'd get 2 triggers of the Kastral. I still like drawing for one of them, and I think I'd probably just pick... I actually kind of like the idea of getting the Ledger Shredder down here. Putting the Ledger Shredder down with the finality counter on it. Now on somebody else's turn, it could potentially connive, which isn't a bad thing. Could get itself growed up. But we could immediately just take that finality counter off of it. I think I'll just put it on Nesting Grounds. Right? Doesn't particularly matter. We still have what? I'll tap the stadium and that just to get a counter on it. So we still have 1, 2, 3 mana up. So we still have Unbreakable Formation up if need be. We just, move to our opponent's turn, let it go. Skyscat's getting bigger because we have a couple creatures with flying. Let's say one person on our opponent's turns cast their second spell. We have to connive. We don't have a choice. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to draw. But at any rate, we connive, right? So we draw a card and we pitch a card. If we pitch a non-land card, it gets a counter. I like Jubilant Skybunder. Cloud Chaser Kastral. I guess I'll just pitch that one and give this one a +1/+1 counter. Now we'll move to our turn. Still got the mana up. We have the Unbreakable if need be. I like the Unbreakable here. It could make a big attack, giving everybody a Vigilance and a +1/+1 counter if we want to do that. But I kind of would like to use my blue mana to play something like Teferi Time Raveler. This is a card that, well, it's a bird on the the critter's printing, so it felt right. But it's just a nasty planeswalker. Each opponent can only cast spells anytime they could cast a sorcery. And we can +1 to play sorceries at instant speed if we want to, or we can -3 to return up to one target artifact, creature, or enchantment to its owner's hand and draw a card. So a pretty nasty ability. If I don't plan to -3 here, I might as well just +1, right? That's what, 1, 2. Let's say we tap the stadium for that for 3. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 mana left. Still plenty enough for the Unbreakable formation. I do kind of like Jubilant Skybounder getting it down here because it can protect our board, right? Rally the Ranks might make sense to give the +1/+1 buff, but I think I'd rather keep up the Unbreakable formation here just to protect the board. I think I'm willing to take one more attack, mainly because if I have enough, I can Stadium someone this turn. So if I have a good option for that, I'm going to do it. Swing out, because there's no reason not to. Skycat's a 5/5, Ledger Shredder's a 2/4, and they're all going to get a +1/+1 buff with the Lieutenant. But let's say we swing. We'll swing at all 3 players, probably, because we have enough creatures to do it. Let's say, for the purposes of this playtest, that all 4 of them hit on turn 5, which is fully expected at a board where I can't imagine all of us are playing flying decks. And if someone is, we'll point 2 creatures at them. Stadium would go up to 10. We would just pick someone to lose the game, but we would have 3 triggers. I would draw a card, actually, I think I would draw 2 and then put the counters on the whole board. I like the idea of getting, I really like the idea of getting like Jubilant Skybounder down, and I guess technically we could have gotten either of these downs on the trigger, but that's okay. We leave up formation, and if we don't play formation, I think formation could come in real handy on our turn. But let's go to our next turn. Anchorage and tapped. Still 7 mana. I don't think there's a world where we can get enough stadium triggers on it to do it again this game. But I think that's absolutely a-okay, right? Sovereign could make us a token. I think I would just... Let's see. Kanji has to attack for its ability. This one does it. This one just gets the ability for its kicker. Play the Skybonder. We'll tap this, let's say, for part of it. I'll plus Teferi again. And then I think I'll just rally the ranks to give the birds a buff. Just get into combat and just go swing it again. 5, 6, 9, 15, 19 damage this turn to somebody. We get the Strixhaven's triggers going, and we could always start putting things down here. But again, just keeping the formation up, keeping the Pong Vet for removal this turn. And I think we can kind of see a good board state here of us pushing towards a ability for us to just win the game. We took the important person out the first time with Strixhaven Stadium. Here we're probably hitting somebody pretty darn hard in the air, and we can keep up the protection for it. We could always just dump this Kanji in this turn with Kastral's ability, draw a card, put counters around again. I mean, I see a world where this board state just leads to a ton of fun for us. Let's get into the second playtest. Keeping a 4-lander with Rally the Ranks, Skycat, and Folk Hero. So as long as Kastral's out, whenever we cast a bird, we would draw a card. It only happens once per turn. So that's a pretty solid ability. Turn 1, get the Lupin Flower Village in. Turn 2, we see that wave goodbye. I'll get that Skycat Sovereign down. That way we can start having it grow. And worst case, on turn 4, we can make a token. Turn 3, we draw another bird and Keeper of the Nine Gales. I love seeing that. Skycat can just take an attack as a 2/2 here and get into somebody if need be. Turn 4, we're still 1 mana off Kastral, but we know we're going to be playing it next turn. So we do have Aven if we want to keep it up to stop somebody from casting something, but we could also just like put something like Rally Ranks down, calling birds, take a bigger attack. Or we could just leave Aven up and flash it in on somebody else's turn. I kind of like the idea here of just rallying and buff these guys up, take some attacks, at somebody. Turn 5 here, we'll get Kastral down. Go and make some attacks again. That should, on turn 5, get us at least one Kastral trigger. I kind of want the draw, and if I had a second one, then I would put counters on the board. So let's just say we got both and got the counters across the board. Again, nice attack there. Well worth it. Turn 6, there we go. We get into the land. 6 mana, 3 for the banner, calling birds. So now birds are getting +2/+2. I've got 4 mana left. I could Aven. Almost there on the root. I could Folk Hero set up. Kind of like the idea of holding up the Aven. That way if somebody tries to remove something, I can Aven to plot it in response to save something. But again, go to combat. I don't see a world where all 3 of these can't hit separate players, or at least try to. We'll save the purpose of this that 2 of them hit. I'll draw a card and just spread the counters again. I really like the idea of getting the counters on everybody and keeping them going, just having our birds get bigger and bigger. Now turn 7, we don't hit the land, but that's okay. We hit an Arcane Signet. We can sack a bird to draw a card with that. But let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana left, right? It would be great to have a Folk Hero, but let's do Gwere just for the 6 mana. Other birds have Vigilance. Again, go to combat, attack. Let's say again 2 of them go through a draw on that one and a counter across the board. And again, here now we're building good board state. All that's left is removal. If somebody has removal for Kastral or anything else, or a board wipe, we're in bad shape. But we are playing a playtest. There's only so much we can do. 9 mana here. If we're the only ones with counters on them, we just wave goodbye, right? And take a big attack. The root wouldn't be bad either, but I kind of like the idea of doing something like wave goodbye this turn and just keep up the Unbreakable formation, right, for protection. Take another big attack. I would probably want to draw 2 and put the counters across the board, and I think we're in a fair state at that point to determine where we're going here. But let me know, what do you think of Kastral down in the comments below. This is an interesting deck. I like the birds. Birds got great support. I think they're going to feel a lot better for this deck. Got great protection. Doing that tribal go wide thing. You're in the air, so they're hard to deal with. Again, I like this deck a ton. I hope Mikey likes my roof of the deck. But let me know what you think down in the comment section below, and I catch you guys next time.